Let me make sure it's come through. Here we go. There's always like a 15-second delay or so.
Oh,
But
okay.
I think it still says scheduled. Let me see. I didn't want to add that to queue. Close, and hopefully it should be good now. Social media as well. Oh, let me make sure it's come. Pause that so the audio doesn't come through. Cool. We are live.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you everybody for joining. If you watched last night's, thank you, and hopefully there are some people here this morning as well. Hopefully you guys aren't getting tired and bombarded with the chats. I'm having fun talking to people. Today I am here with Maria, and a name that I see all the time in baseball but still have no clue how to pronounce properly. How,
So, so my name is pronounced Maria Inês.
Ini-
Inês.
Inish?
Simões. I have a third name that I don't usually use,
Okay.
and Teixeira. So I could not use all of them. I had to choose some. But it's
Right.
actually very common in Portugal that we have like 4, 5, sometimes 6 names. So
Yeah,
yeah,
okay. Okay. That's
Teixeira.
so Teixeira? Teixeira? Teixeira,
Yeah.
okay. Because that's a very very common name in baseball, which it's a lot of people in baseball named Teixeira are Dominican, but
Ooh, really?
yeah, and that's interesting about the multiple names. That's something I've actually come to learn recently. Is a lot of cultures seem to have more than the three name system that we have here in America, where we're just like you have a first, a middle, and last, and that's it. But I feel like a lot of cultures have multiple names,
Yes,
like more than just the
Spain,
three.
Brazil. Hmm. Exactly. Hmm.
Yeah, come start posting this on social media. People are going to be confused because I was like, "Come hang out in an hour," and now I'm like, "Come hang out now."
We're so spontaneous.
Yeah. um. Anyway, I'll let you do an introduction because you do. I know that you have a website and stuff. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit about what you do or whatever, you can, and that way people can know you a little bit better.
Sure. So my name is Maria,
Right.
and I'm from Portugal, um, and currently I live in Berlin with my partner. I'm a freelance writer, and I write about education and languages. When I was in Portugal, I was working as a teacher, and I have my blog called smartpolyglot.com. And apart from that, I just write articles for other language companies, language organizations, schools, and so on. And of course, language learning is my favorite hobby, which is why we're here. We love talking about it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um. That's cool. Yeah, and like I said, I appreciate you joining. You were someone that I've seen on. There we go. I think social media is covered, so now I can pop back here. Uh, Somebody that I've seen on Twitter a ton, with tons of insight and stuff, and this is really cool. And even just like last night and a lot of these podcasts, I'm putting together people that I've seen post a ton, and it's cool to finally have this in person, quote unquote. But you know
Yes.
that kind of thing. So um,
Totally.
I'm gonna jump into right off the article that you wrote for Medium, which I should have. I will put that in the description box, but it is about the vulnerability in adults learning languages. Do you want to kind of take us through like some of that? Because I know the big thing. I was actually when you messaged me, I was reading it, and that's when I was like, crap, because I wanted to read it right before, so it was as fresh as possible.
Right.
But I do know
Oh,
in
that's no problem.
but I know in the first little
Yeah.
bit you talked about the hardest thing to teach adults was that failure is kind of okay. But if you want to talk about that for a little bit, and we can discuss that.
Okay, sure. So, as
Instagram.
I said, when I was in Portugal, I was working as a teacher. So, I was an English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And something I noticed is that regardless of nationality, regardless of age, but they were all young adults or adults,
Right.
regardless of all that, they all shared very similar fears and they all thought they were special or unique
Mm-hmm.
in their fear. They thought, I'm the one who's dumb. I'm the one who can't do this. I'm the one
Right.
who who is an absolute failure. They couldn't understand that actually many other learners felt the exact same way.
Mm,
And I was constantly repeating the same advice. And that's why, I was just collecting these ideas. One day I have to write about this. One day I have to write about this.
right.
And this article is kind of a combination of all of those thoughts that I had during those times, as well as things I've come to feel as a language learner as well. And
Mm,
so the overall idea of the article is just that, yes, we all feel nervous sometimes. We all feel a little bit insecure depending on our personality. We all will feel insecure about something,
mm,
yes. And that's okay. And actually, being insecure and exposing ourselves once in a while to things that make us really uncomfortable
mm.
can be an opportunity to grow. And I think that's an idea that's quite widespread, but people still fear this a
Yeah.
lot. So
That
it's,
that
yeah,
hits
about
home. That hits home with me a lot. Like I'm part of the reason that I jump, which I'm trying to buckle down and be serious this time, but a lot of the reasons that I will jump and dabble from language to language is because of the failure in one language, and it's not necessarily like I feel like it's failure, but it's just your brain taking time to get. You're not going to learn a language in a month or 2 months, like, and I think it's hard for people to get past that.
Yes, it's very much because of the way that language learning has been marketed, or rather, language learning products, right? The way
Mm-hmm.
they've been marketed and packaged in a way that, everything is quick, right? It's
Yeah.
2 months, it's 3 months, it's 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
sometimes I was teaching a language and my students would be like, I saw this ad like that maybe I could get fluent in a week. So why are you taking so long with this? Like
Yeah.
why am I not there yet with you? And
Right.
teachers even, oh my God, now I'm compared to these tools
Yeah.
and to the apps and everything, and it is just marketing. I think it's possible to become conversational maybe in some months,
Mm-hmm.
but fluent is quite a strong term. And also, I think one thing that I said in that article was that sometimes we look at insecurity, failure, discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
all that jazz, as something that is as obstacles when actually they are requirements. They are things that we must go through if we want to reach, that place.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, which, by the way, will never actually have a finish line. I believe this is my personal
Yeah.
perspective, is that we never actually get to a finish line. We are constantly learning.
Yeah, I agree
So
completely.
yeah.
And that's I had made that video about the obsession with 90-day challenges and kind of this idea that people want to be, fluent or this, whatever. And then and I get that a lot of people do continue past that. The 3 month journey is kind of just getting, and I know the add one challenge and stuff like that, but I think that a lot of people, like, once they hit that 90 days, if they're not whatever their definition of fluent is, they're just like, well, that didn't work. So it's a weird, and it is a lifelong journey. I remember kind of that revel. I think I had even tweeted to you one time that you had said something about being Portuguese, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "It blows my mind." But I know that you must have learned English for a long time, but there's still stuff that you probably hear regularly that you're like, "What?"
Yes, of course. And even in our own native languages, sometimes we look at an expression or a word and we're like, really? That's how it's used? Or
Yeah.
really? That's how it's pronounced? Like,
Yep.
we feel really stupid. But that's it. We should feel stupid sometimes. That's how we discover,
Mm-hmm.
that's how we read, that's how we
Yeah.
search.
Well, what I found is when you have that moment where you feel stupid or it's a big mistake, I learn that word better because I have that weird emotion attached to it.
Oh, yeah. We will always remember it
Yeah,
due to the awkwardness.
yeah. So you're like I said, it blew my mind when I found, which I hadn't necessarily heard you speak, but everything that you write is always so well written. And then you were like, I'm
Thank you.
Portuguese, and I was like, that doesn't even. I was like, that blew my mind. But so if you live in Berlin, do you still operate a lot in English or okay?
So that is something that so everyone was telling me, "Oh, you're learning German because that's one of the languages I'm learning, obviously, right?
Hmm?
I'm in Germany, but everyone was saying, "Oh, you're so lucky. Now you're going to Berlin. This is it. You're going to be fluent. You're going to be awesome." And then when I arrived here, I was like, 90% of the people who live here speak English.
Right,
That's it. Like, um, sometimes ads, coffee shops, everything. Sometimes everything is in English.
right.
And I do my best to speak German, but it has happened to me before that I actually approached, for example, a bartender and I started speaking German, like, hey, I left my umbrella here or whatever. And
Hmm.
he was like, sorry, you have to speak English. I don't speak German. And I was like, ah. So
Whoa.
yeah, Berlin is a little bit of a universe apart from the rest of Germany, so to
Right.
speak. It's very multicultural. It's good to learn languages in that sense. There are
Hmm.
so many different communities, so many different immigrants, so many people you can learn from. But the other side of the coin is that speaking German can be a little bit difficult. You have to really, sign up for a course or meet people who have the same goal as you do, and then start from there. That's what I did.
Yeah. Wow, that's wild. I know that uh, that's one thing I always talk about. If you're an American traveling, is even if they speak the language, you're an opportunity for that person to practice English, and they always are like, "Nope, English. I need to practice." Um,
Exactly.
I guess for you, sometimes if you really didn't want to, you could just default to Portuguese and be like, "I don't speak English. What are you talking about?" But like,
And especially from Portugal, people will be like, no.
yeah. When did you start learning English? Was it in school? I assume.
Thing is, yeah, in Portugal we have several years of mandatory English. So ever since primary school
Wow.
up to college, pretty much, we have English classes. And for several years, that's absolutely mandatory. And also, my mother used to be an English teacher.
Oh wow.
So, my sister is older than I am, and as I was growing up, she was always watching Disney movies in the original version, listening to music in English and everything. So, I even remember listening to English as I didn't know what it meant, but I remember the first sounds that
Hmm.
stuck with me, like the winter, this earth sound really, stuck with me, and I was catching up on these
Right.
sounds, and so I think it was a little bit growing up, definitely that contributed a lot. And then just these mandatory years in school, as well as just being interested in music and movies and series. There is no such thing as dubbing in Portugal,
Oh wow.
except yeah, except for animation movies, maybe like Disney Channel, stuff like that. But when you go to the movies, if a movie is in French or Spanish or Italian or English, you watch it in that version. It's that simple. um, with subtitles, of
With
course.
subtitles, right?
So that's why it's relatively easy to, start getting involved, start getting interested, and then slowly, uh, it's easier once you commit to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I really wish that I wish that America would do something like that, which we don't really import a lot of videos, like in terms of on like going to the movies and stuff. Usually, if it's a foreign film, it'll just be like straight to DVD or whatever. But
Oh, okay.
well, I'm sure in major cities, like I'm sure New York City and Los Angeles and places like that get them. But like I really wish. Um, um, I wish that like if a major Japanese or Chinese or French or whatever a major movie was releasing, I wish that there would at least be some markets over here that would get it and subtitle. But again, like, and I'm not stereotyping Americans, but like the average American would not watch that. Like we have
Right.
such a we're such a proud English only. You know what I mean? Like it's I say that somewhat mocking, but somewhat true. Like we have this thing where if it's not English, I don't want it.
I understand. Yes, because it's your cinema culture and the culture of series and everything. I mean, the United States completely changed the game, internationally.
Right.
So it's a bit difficult to get them interested in this.
And,
But for example, in Portugal, our movie industry is not nearly as developed as the American one. And so all of these things come together, and we consume a lot of
Mm.
cultural content from other countries, including Spain, Brazil. I mean, when my family has a gathering or a party in which we dance and this and that, it's always Brazilian music, music from Latin America, Spain, all of that,
Yeah.
English, of course. So Portugal, again, it's two sides of the coin, right? So on the one hand, our industry is still not as developed in terms of the movie industry and everything. On the other hand, that's kind of good at the same time for those who like learning languages because we are
Right.
exposed to them very early on. Very
Yeah.
early on.
I have a comment here that says somebody says maybe I'm totally confusing her with someone else, but is she from a channel called Soul Pancake? It
Oh man, no, I'm not. Could I have a look-alike?
says I think it was Soul Pancake where there was a video about a Portuguese girl trying to speak English. Well, she wouldn't try to speak English. Her English is spot on, unless it was long time ago. But that's it.
No, I'm
Erasmus,
not.
if
Oh,
you have that link, send that to me because I want to watch that after to see, and I'll send it to Maria
yeah, me
after too.
too.
So
I want to see if I have a twin
yeah.
somewhere.
That's another. So, being Portuguese, do you ever? Let's see. I don't know how to word this really. Is there like a thing where like some Portuguese people are upset that like when most of well maybe not most of the world, especially Americans, when they think of Portuguese, it defaults to Brazil.
Yeah, sure. And you want to know if this is somehow something that like upsets
Yeah,
people or
because you think of Portuguese from being from Brazil. Why would you not think of Portuguese being from Portugal?
I understand, yeah. I mean, there are many people who think we speak Spanish, but I'm going to be honest. Maybe there are some Portuguese people who care about this, but I think people who care about this are usually more like, nationalists and this and that. And
Mm,
in my opinion, is perfectly normal. I'm not upset by this. So, if anyone on Twitter ever confused me or thought I spoke
oh my
Spanish or
god.
Brazilian, that's okay by me because in fact there are many Brazilians around the world, and so
Right.
it's normal. People go with the version of the language, the dialect that has the largest number of speakers, so that's fine. Brazil is also more present internationally with the music and the soap operas and all of that, so it makes sense to me. It's just more visible, it's more present, and the number of people is it's not comparable. It's huge.
Right.
I mean, in Portugal, I think we have around 10 million people, and Brazilians are like 200, more than 200 million. I mean, it's normal.
Right.
So I'm not upset by that, and I love Brazilian Portuguese. I think it sounds very. It's also one of the languages, dialects that I grew up with, apart from my own.
Right.
So I also appreciate it.
Now, are you so? I've always wondered, and I've always assumed, but are the differences from Portugal Portuguese, and Brazilian Portuguese? Is it kind of the difference in like American English and British English? Like, are they? I mean, is it?
Yes, totally. Uh, I would not compare it to Spanish because I think Spanish from Spain and Spanish from Latin American countries are actually more similar to each other than European Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese. But the English comparison is actually better because we understand each other, but the pronunciation is the biggest difference,
Mm,
without a doubt. So when you see it in writing, actually, you see that it's the same language
mm,
because it's written almost the same way. It's really the pronunciation that changes a lot. And yes, some choice of words, just like British English and American English, one or two grammar points that maybe change once in a while. But if you learn one version, you will understand the other. If you are aware of the slight pronunciation. For
mm,
example, in Portugal, we don't have this sound like che, je, which is very common in Brazilian Portuguese, right?
mm.
Always give the example of the word football, right? In Portugal, we would say futebol, football, and in Brazil they would say futebol or something of this sort. I don't
Oh,
want to, I'm not. But this che, je sound does not exist in Portugal, so this can be your first reference.
yeah.
uh, Difference between the dialects. Then from there are just a couple more differences,
Yeah.
and
I know. I would listen to some like Portuguese. I couldn't tell you a name of it right off, but I love listening to like music and stuff from different countries, and I would listen to some Portuguese stuff, whether it be Brazilian or or from Portugal, like anything. I don't remember right off, but like the
Mm.
and I know that I had made that tweet about how Portuguese sounds like drunken Spanish, but it's like I feel like
Oh, right.
it's so much faster and and I feel like the sounds in Portuguese aren't as like I feel like it's harder to determine where a word starts and stops because there's not
Yes.
like a crisp sound.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, and definitely agree. When I'm also not insulted when people say that, oh, but learning Spanish is much easier than Portuguese. I agree. I think the grammar is equally difficult, but I think that, I mean, difficult for, someone who speaks a language that is different from that. But
Mm,
I think that Spanish, without a doubt, is easier than Portuguese when it comes to pronunciation, consistency. Like, you learn how it's read, and you're done for life. Like, you just read the way
right.
it's written exactly. And that's not the case with Portuguese. So I understand that it's definitely Spanish sounds a bit kind and a bit more forgiving, maybe to the ear. Yeah, I understand that.
Well, what's funny is like I feel like a hypocrite because I'm always like I always think about Spanish and how it is. It's phonetic. The way that it sounds is the way that it's wrote. And I'm always like I'm almost like judgmental of other languages that don't do that. I'm like, why don't you do that? And then I'm like, dude,
Why?
you speak English, man. You need to chill. Your language does not fit your alphabet at all.
Yeah, English is one of the most irregular languages,
Oh,
that's true. And we don't get that awareness. Imagine, English is my second language, but even then, I wasn't aware of the crazy sounds that sometimes come out of it. And
oh.
it's when I was teaching that, especially Brazilians, unfortunately, English education in Brazil is not good. Brazilians themselves have told me it's miserable. We want to learn English. We want to be a part of the world with English, but in order to get the level, the fluent or conversational level, it's very difficult in
Hmm.
Brazil, especially if you don't have enough money. So I had a lot of Brazilian students in Portugal, and they were the ones to always point out, but why is it like this? But why? Like, because they were learning, they were truly interesting people to observe because they were learning it from absolute scratch.
Scratch, right?
Like, hello, thanks, bye. But then when you started really going deeper, they were learning everything from scratch. And so they were curious, they were always questioning. And sometimes I was like, there's no explanation, it's just like this,
It's,
There's this.
yeah.
Luckily, Portuguese is just the same. So I could say, don't complain. Remember, you speak Portuguese. So,
That's I mean, yeah. Let's see. Barbara Teixeira said there's also some words in Portuguese that are not used in Brazil and vice versa.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. That's how
For
it.
example, they say galera, which is like guys, you guys, people, which we don't use in Portugal, for example. Yeah.
Nice.
So some
Gotcha.
words, some words. However, in Portugal, we get so many, we are so exposed to Brazilian music and soap operas and so on that we are used to this. So when they do speak, we don't feel like, oh my God, what's that word? It's like,
Right.
no, it goes, yeah, normally, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wonder if it's the same. So I wonder if the differences are like you being from Portugal, you have an easier time understanding Brazilians than Brazilians vice versa because they are only surrounded by the Brazilian media.
Yep. I've had Brazilian students who told me the moment I arrived in Portugal, I could not understand anything. They
Whoa.
said yep. They said there were Brazilians who said I had never met a Portuguese person in my life. I had never heard a song in European Portuguese in my life. And especially young people like who had just arrived in the country with their parents, right?
Hmm.
They were having classes with Portuguese teachers and they were like, "Oh my God, at first I couldn't understand anything." And but slowly, but it's exactly as you said, it's almost like the more you are surrounded by your native language, it's just that. Sometimes they would tell me, Maria, you know what, I'm just dumb. And I was like, you're not dumb, it's about the culture of the country and how exposed you are to other languages.
Hmm.
I mean, And there was a lot of insecurity there, and a lot of, again, this issue with insecurities and everything. It's interesting because when we think of Brazilian people, sometimes we think of, woo, confidence and extrovert and this, that. But I figured that unfortunately, many of them didn't have access to the tools that they needed to achieve their dreams, and
Mm.
that's very sad to see. And I'm so happy that I could help them with this. And it's exactly that. It's a system. It's not the person who is dumb. It's not the person is not especially stupid or ignorant. It's the system you were born in, right?
Yeah.
You have to slowly.
Yeah, no, no, I understand that. So I'd like, and I was just thinking, I didn't mean to turn this into the Portuguese show, but like, I'm like,
Woohoo!
I really like, I don't get to talk to people for, so if I have someone from a different country or something like that, could, I love to learn about cultures and the way that things are. Like, that's one of my, like,
Sure.
I mean, I equate it to language learning, but I like to learn about cultures even if I'm not learning the language. Like, I love to see how different people live. And this is actually, had a question that came through here, and it says, and this is actually a really good point or a good question about that. The rate of speech, is Brazilian Portuguese faster than European Portuguese? Like, is there do you speak at a different kind of speed?
I
That's probably, I don't know if you'd really. No.
I don't know this about the speed, but I think so our Portuguese from Portugal I think will sound a little bit faster just because I would say from Portugal could be a little bit
Faster.
faster or at least more kind of closed.
Hmm.
While Brazilian Portuguese tends to be a bit more like open in terms of the vowels, and therefore it sounds a bit also friendlier maybe to the ear instead of so fast, I would say.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So when you are, I know English doesn't count because you've been, well, I mean, it does count because you've been learning it from a young age. But like now, when you're starting, like when you started learning German or something like that, what is your process of language learning? Like, do you use the apps, or are you completely away from those and use a different material? What do you do?
I've tried everything.
Okay.
I've tried so many different things. So when I started learning German, I used an app. And the app that I used was Babbel.
Hmm.
I'm not sponsored. I just used it, and I
And
liked it.
they're based in Berlin, I believe, aren't they?
And they're based in Berlin. True,
Yeah.
they're based in Berlin. So I used that app, and it was very useful. If
Hmm.
not, because something I like about that app is that they use dialogues from the beginning. So you see words in context, you see different vocabulary immediately used in conversation. So
Yeah.
that's cool. And it was good just to give me some awareness of the grammar and some rules and just get used to it, basically. But it took me to a certain point, right?
Right.
Then I had to get that and try to. So, what are some things that really helped? Let me see. Using reading comprehension books. So, rather than just buying a book and just reading it, it actually had questions and multiple choice
Hmm.
questions and things that tested the understanding of the text in other words. So, it was a little tricky.
Yeah.
And I got those, they were readers, so they were adapted to the levels. So I got several levels, I worked with those. Those were really useful. Um, I also had some classes online. Interestingly enough, I didn't see as much progress having classes alone as I experienced in an in-person group
Hmm.
class.
Yeah.
Usually we say, you should have private classes because then it's just you and you're actually interacting with the teacher and everything. But I'm still trying to figure out why. There are probably reasons for this, but I witnessed incredible progress when I finally signed up for an intensive course. I had that possibility in terms of time, at the time and everything. It was fantastic. So I think the trick here, and I don't have a set of rules, but what I like to do is diversify.
Hmm.
I like to have different access to different things. I like to combine different things. And most of all, I like learning in context. So, as I said, like text, dialogues, movies, series, all of that. I even tried sometimes writing like lists of verbs and vocabulary, and I was suffering because I could not. I just can't memorize all of that.
Right.
I loved your video about deleting all the apps
Mm,
because I like apps. They're cool tools, they're cool complements, they're fantastic. They were an amazing idea to, give people access to languages. So, nothing against apps in particular.
yeah,
I just think we rely on them too much.
yeah,
Like, we see them as the secret ingredient that's going to take us there, and this I don't agree with.
yeah.
So,
I
that's my
think yeah, I think the apps are. I think they're good, and honestly, I've tried to start thinking. I've tried to turn it into which it is a positive thing because I feel like I'm advancing in Japanese faster. Now, I may not be gaining the vocabulary, but what I am gaining is the ability to recognize them in a native content, not a sentence that's written. Like I can hear the word with no subtitles and recognize it. And so that is going well. But I think that I've tried to turn it into a positive spin on myself and say, you know what? I've been stuck at the same level in Jap. Of course, I haven't studied it religiously, but I've been stuck at the same level in Japanese for probably over a little over a year now, and all I've been using is those apps. So maybe I'm a little further advanced in Japanese than I thought I was, because, like you said, the apps can only take you to a certain spot.
nice.
So I've tried to turn it into a
Which is not
positive spin.
useless, which is okay, right? But
Yeah,
then we need some other push.
yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, and if I can add something, I also think you've made a fantastic choice by focusing on Japanese only
Hmm.
for some time, because that is something I noticed made such a difference for my German. I was constantly, I mean, I still don't stop myself or forbid myself from, dabbling in a language or just reading something interesting about another language. That's perfectly fine. But
Hmm.
uh, I really noticed that the moment I said, you know what, I'm only going to focus on German for a month, or I'm only going to focus, I'm not going to touch anything else. Oh my goodness, the
Hmm.
progress, it was crazy.
Yeah, and that was the other. See, I'm not a very I guess I have like a form of ADD or something because when I have this right, and I'm like, all right, let's study this language, right? Well, you pop into Duolingo and you're like, all right, there we go. Oh man, I forgot that I did French on this a long time ago. Let me see, and I don't have that now. Like when I go to YouTube, I may and I've talked about this before in a couple of the podcasts, but I have a sub channel on my channel that is dedicated to only Japanese video. So I put my location for YouTube in Japan. I went to the trending page. The first video I watched on that channel was in Japanese, all Japanese. The title was in all Japanese. So the only thing that's recommended to me is Japanese content because it thinks I'm in Japan and that's what it's seen that I've watched. So now, if I go down a YouTube rabbit hole, well, first, I don't see the subscriptions here. I don't see, if Matt versus Japan makes a video, which even though it is about Japanese, it's still in English. I don't see if,
Right.
my friend Luke Truman makes a video or any of these other people that I watch, I don't see that. I only see, because I'm not subscribed to them on those channels, all I see. So if I go down this YouTube rabbit hole of just, it doesn't matter. It's all in Japanese. I'm immersing. I'm hearing the language.
Man, that's crazy. Actually, that's great advice because I know for a fact that immersion is amazing.
Mhm.
And but sometimes I still struggle with that. Sometimes the content that I listen to, that I watch, is mostly in English
Right.
or Spanish. Actually, not Portuguese that much, but English, Spanish, and everything. So sometimes I think that I should really follow your your lead
Well,
and surround myself. And actually, I would like you to. So you do this with YouTube, right?
uh huh.
Is there anything else that you've done, like to kind of curate your space to catch
Yeah.
up in?
So on Netflix, you can create different accounts. Now it hasn't fully taken over in Netflix, but I have a thing that's just called like well, my name is Jonathan. I don't know if I've ever even addressed that on my channel, but that's my real name is Jonathan. But well, Seabolt is my last name, which is actually of German descendants. So, but
Ooh, yeah.
so I created a separate profile that's called Jonathan's Japanese. So the only shows I've watched in it are Japanese. And it Netflix takes a little bit longer, but it is starting to trickle down and the shows that'll be recommended will be a Japanese anime or something like that. So it's starting to kind of take foothold in that, but I did do that as well. Yeah. Anything that you can create a separate profile for and which Japanese, I'm lucky. Japanese has probably the most accessible media on the planet, because
Right.
they produce so much content and there's so much stuff. And from where Japanese is such a highly sought after language in terms of, people love it. It's this
Yeah,
weird
it's
foreign
popular.
exotic land. It's so easy to get your hands on that content. So I'm not saying it would work for everything, but I mean, it's worth a shot. It's worked for me. Like, I don't know how
Right.
big like I don't know how big like German or YouTube is or anything like that, but there's so much content in Japanese, so it's really easy for that.
And I think in German too, because German is also a popular language. So I think I'll follow that. Actually, I had never thought about that. That's really cool.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna try.
I got that idea from Matt versus Japan, which is
Right.
where I get a lot of stuff from. And like I always feel bad because like I talked to I talked to him last June or July, and I was like, I'm gonna give this immersion thing a shot, and I did it for like a day, and it's so hard to wrap your head around watching something that you don't understand. It's so hard to force yourself to watch it. But for whatever reason, like I've taken a little bit different of approach, and instead of saying, I need to watch this anime or something, I there's a girl that I watch on YouTube that plays Mario Maker. I don't care, like, and it doesn't matter what the content is. It's I'm enjoying it, and
Exactly.
that is making the difference.
Exactly.
Um,
And oh, sorry.
no,
Yeah,
go
really.
ahead, go ahead.
Actually, now that you mentioned that, there was an episode in my real life, and that was that I was going out, grabbing some food, some months ago, and everyone at the table was German. And they were speaking English because of me. And I said something like, I was thinking to myself, B2 level, whoa, so cool, guys, please speak German. I understand German. I've been studying German. I've had an intensive course. Like, let's do this. Okay, so they start speaking German, and I didn't understand anything.
Yeah,
I understood maybe like 5%. You know what? It's exactly as you said. It's very difficult to tell yourself, okay, I'm listening to all of this. I'm seeing people speak, but I can't understand anything. And
right.
you stay there. You don't walk away. You don't
Hmm.
ask them to turn to English. You don't do anything. And that was one of the times that I submitted myself to something a little uncomfortable and a little bit awkward. Because imagine what it's like. You're at the table with these people, right?
Hmm.
And I can't remember if it was just two or like three other people, but the thing is, talking enthusiastically about something, sometimes laughing, someone tells a joke, and I couldn't understand anything. Sometimes they were, bursting into laughter, and I was like, huh?
Yeah.
What? Oh, awkward smile, like,
Yep.
yeah, so funny.
Yeah.
And those were some of the longest minutes that I've ever had as a language
I'm
learner.
sure.
After a certain point, they probably sensed that I was totally like on another planet, and they were like, do you want us to speak English maybe? Because you seem to be a little bit, quiet. I'm incredibly talkative, as you see. So that was a little weird. They were like, you're a bit quiet. Like, are you sure you don't want us to speak English a little bit? And I was like, no, that's perfectly fine. Like, just, keep going. So it's again that issue. As you said, exposing ourselves, watching content, listening to people speak, even if we don't understand everything immediately, and even if we feel a little bit out of place.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing with immersion, which I see. There's some more comments coming through, which I'll read in just a second. But the big thing with so and I've had people even be like, hey, immersing in stuff that you don't understand is pointless, and I don't agree with that, and here's why. In order to You have to learn how the language sounds. You have to. The only way to do that is to listen, and if you wait until you understand the language, you are setting yourself back, because it's going to take you years to be able to understand. Then you're going to have to spend another 100 to 1,000 hours of listening, even though you know those words, but you're going to have to look them up because you haven't heard them in context or anything like that. So if you start listening now, you're going to at least, because now when I listen, and again, just a disclaimer for anybody watching this, I started immersing April 1st, but that does not mean I started learning Japanese. So do not compare
Ah,
do not compare what you're doing to me if you're doing immersion or any kind of learning. But I've immersed. I can pull up my sheet here because I track how much I immerse every day.
Ooh, awesome.
And so, which I didn't start tracking until April 3rd, and then I didn't even start tracking my passive immersion, quote unquote, which is where it's in my. I try to always have an earbud in listening, so that way if there's a moment where I sit and relax for a second, it's Japanese going into my ears. But I have immersed for. So since April, I started tracking April 4th. I've immersed 22 hours, and that's only what I've counted. I didn't count passive listening the days before. So that's a full day in a week. So that's a seventh of my week. That's already 24 hours towards being able to hear. And I've already noticed in that 24 hours, there's a difference in how I hear the language now to April 1st when I started. Even though I knew some Japanese and could hear some, I can pick the sounds out, and I'm starting to be able to hear words come through. So I think it is important. Let me get to some of these comments now, because I don't want anybody to feel... Let's see. So the thing that sucks... Okay, the thing that sucks with YouTube is all it takes is one click on the content from the wrong language, and the recommendations are going to be... they're not going to be from that. So yeah, you have to be careful with that.
Okay.
I actually turned off my autoplay on my Immersion channel. Or like on the channel I use for Immersion. That way it doesn't even accidentally play. If I see the next video recommended as Japanese... Okay. I will click it, but I turn the autoplay off. That way it doesn't do that. Paul says, if you use Twitter or something, you could immerse for reading by switching that country's version of Twitter. That is very true. Of course, if you're learning Korean, for instance, if I read... if you're learning Korean, you should just get a Kakao. That's like a social media there. Luke Truman says, hey, Luke, it's been the Luke Truman Show the past 2 episodes. I've mentioned you 100 times. Lindy, finally I can make it to one of your live streams. Welcome, Lindy. This is thank you for joining.
Hey,
thank you for
everyone.
joining. Luke said, Lindy also, so I can tell, I'll tell you in Facebook, like I finally jumped on trying to do the immersion thing, and it's been going really, really well. I think if you listen to stuff you don't understand, loads of words jump out at you still, and if you look those words up, they stick really easy. Good point by Luke, and I've mentioned this in the past 2 live streams. I was watching a Mario Maker video. People may be tired of hearing this story, but this is huge, and this is how you know it can work. So I was watching this YouTube video of a girl playing Mario Maker, and she was going through, and she got to this section where I don't know if you play video games or anything at all, so this may be... But like,
I do, but not this particular one.
Okay,
so
yeah. So there was a ton of P switches that she had to pick up and throw. Well, she had to get through fast because it was a timed course, and she kept picking them up. And every time she picked it up and threw it, she kept saying Nagaru, and she kept saying it fast, Nagaru, 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 like she needed. And so I was like, okay. First off, I hear that word clear as day, and I've heard it multiple times. Now I see this woman throwing a P switch. That's probably to throw. So, of course, I go to the dictionary, it's to throw, boom, no problem. And there was another issue where she was trying to get into a pipe, and lava was rising, and she was like, Haidu, 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 Haidu. And I was like, okay, Haidu, okay, that's probably go in, get in, something of that nature, and sure enough, it was. And they're sticking. So that's, I agree with that with Luke completely.
Yeah,
hearing
absolutely.
it in
I agree
context.
too, and that's why it's so important to have diversity. That's why I was talking also about books, maybe apps, maybe movies, maybe series, maybe music, because words will repeat themselves, and when they do, you will have that extra sensorial, sign or memory.
Yeah.
You saw, in your case, it was listening to that word, now with image, video, action, right?
Yeah.
So our brains remember these words much, much more easily with this kind of diversity and combo of different senses, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, if you're, and I'm not against application learning. I did it because I jump all over the place. That was why I deleted those. It was mainly to get my own focus back. But if you learn a word in an application, you're going to see it in 1 or 2 different sentences. That doesn't fully portray what happens. So, and that's the reason that you need to listen to content and you need to read. Because when you see it in these different contexts, it's not going to hit the same way. Because there's been words that I know in Japanese that I hear and I'm like, okay, I know I've heard that word, but I don't understand it, and it's because it's being used in a different context.
Exactly.
So, Luke said, also you can review all the stuff that you've already learned. That's very true. Immersing is how I learned Spanish, and Helena Teixeira says, immersion is how I learned Spanish and French by living in Spain and France. Yes, that's true. Curious to know what you consider immerse every day. Yeah, so I can explain a little bit of my immersion. So I have
Yes.
I have two YouTube accounts. I have a what I call and what I define as active and passive immersion is probably different to other people. What I consider active immersion for myself is if I'm watching a TV show or a YouTube video, if I'm watching and listening at the same time. I don't use subtitles. It's just that content in that language as a native would watch it. That's what I consider active. So I count that, and then I count passive, which is anything, even if I'm actively listening, like if I'm sitting there listening to it, but it's a podcast, I don't consider that active, and it absolutely is, but I don't consider it because I don't have the context of the visual aid as well of what's happening. And so anything that I listen to passively, whether it be I'm actively listening, or if I'm at work and I'm going through some stuff, but I've got some Japanese blasting in my ear or something, then that's passive, because when I take a break and I sit there and I'm not thinking about what I'm doing, that's what's going into my ear. So
Exactly.
that's what I would consider that. Rasmus says, "Man, comments are bumping today. I appreciate it. That makes me feel awesome."
Thanks, everyone.
I even created several years ago a Facebook account for my target language, and I only allow pages in my target language. So anytime I log into that account, my newsfeed is in full target language. That's a good.
Awesome.
That's a pretty good idea.
Advice.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice. I like that. Sometimes overwhelming for me. Oh yeah. Keith Hayden, hey, I'm glad I caught the live stream. Welcome, Keith. Thank you for joining.
Hi.
Had an awesome interview with Keith the other day. All right, so Lindy says, what do you guys think about the wide variety of apps available, though? Stressful when there's too many to choose from. Yes.
That's why he deleted them all.
Yeah. That is why I had to delete them all, because I think Lindy probably knows almost better than anybody at my just inability to stick with something, and that's why I had to I just had to get rid of it. And I love, and that's not, I hope people didn't take that video as me. Also, Lindy says, Maria, you were so cute.
Oh my goodness.
I said, I had to delete them because they're great. They are fantastic. But with somebody like me who has like an ADD brain where I'm just like, I want the new shiny thing all the time, I had to get rid of that. Like, I had to. Like, I mean, I just, it was eating me away. Like, the fact that I couldn't stick to anything, and it's because of that. I think the apps are great, but I also think that's the downside of them. From where they do offer so many different things, you're gonna want to see what all. I mean, maybe not. I know a lot of people who, or not. I don't know a lot of people, but I do know some people are like, I'm sticking with this language and that's it. You know.
And I think also that it's useful to choose very, very specific, for example, one app per purpose. So this app is only for reading this, or this app is only for pronunciation, and you can, or in my case, not really like that, but I only use apps now for languages that I am a beginner in. Yeah. I'm a beginner, so I use that app just to give me that initial boost maybe, or, even that, usually I use other resources, but yeah, I use apps mostly for as a beginner. Then I use other resources. So I guess we just need to kind of restrict what we use them for instead of like, I'm just gonna install it and then I'll see, maybe I'll just play around. Then it's absolute chaos and the hours pass by.
Right. No,
So,
it's like I said, I think they're good, especially, and it depends on, like, I'm a huge, I still have the link to Lingodeer in my description, even though I don't use apps anymore, and it's because I love that app. And again, I think that they're great for a beginner, but, I've been at the same level in everything for years. Like, I had to make a change. But yeah, I mean, you got to think how many huge, there's obviously Duolingo, Lingodeer, Babbel, um, Mango Languages,
Memorize.
Memrise. I'm trying to think of some of the stuff I deleted because if there was an app for it, I probably got rid of it. But and then you've got subsidiary apps. Like I mean, I know even in like you've got apps that are targeted toward Link, which I did keep Link. I did keep Link because I do need to get some reading practice in.
Right, that's a good example. So using that one for reading,
Yeah,
done. You know,
yeah.
not.
But yeah, there's so many, and the thing is every one of them are gonna tell you they're the best. Like that's the
And then you only need that one. You don't
yep,
need anything else.
yep.
Which is quite ambitious. I mean, and I'm so serious about getting serious with German and Turkish, which are my intermediate languages. So I
Hmm.
want to bring them to fluency, especially German. That I used to have a bunch of flags on my profiles, like I speak these languages, and then like a bunch of flags, and I was like,
Hmm.
okay, but do I really like? I haven't looked at Italian for ages. I haven't looked at this language for ages.
Hmm.
Actually, I'm kind of just putting flags out there for people to know what I'm interested in.
Hmm.
But I was like, no, I'm gonna delete all of those flags and keep only the ones that I'm fluent and the ones that I'm intermediate in,
Right.
so that I focus on those instead of just promoting that I'm this superstar and then people are like,
Yep.
no, actually,
Yeah.
not really.
No, and that's well, and see the thing is like I used to do that too, and then I mean like if I sat here, so I've spent so much time learning languages to not really speak anything. You know what I mean? And like that's kind of frustrating to me, and
So
it's
painful.
my
Yeah.
own fault. Um, and that's ultimately why I had to kind of just I don't know I had to make a change. That's all.
Sure,
Let's
yeah. Depends
see.
on the profile of each person.
Let's see, Lindy. Oh, yeah, she's yeah. I have. I've been at the same thing for years. I find Link really tricky to use UX. Yeah, Link. I talked to Eric from Link, and he said that they're working on a new interface. I don't know when it's going to be out, but hopefully soon. I like it, but I mean it has been like the same interface for years. True, but we language learners always want to try apps, don't we? We do, man. We always want we like that's
We love new things.
yeah. If there is well, I mean, like to give you an example, Lindy, you're the reason that I found out about Lingo Deer. And as soon as I watched your video on Lingo Deer, like before it was even finished, to the App Store downloaded. Like so. I second that. Link's interface was a bit much for me. Yes. Have you ever tried to learn? Okay, that's a question for Lindy. Okay. Well, let's see. Text, that's a free option. Needing to find audio, but okay. So yeah, but I mean, it's the struggle with language learning, and again, a lot of this goes back to what we opened this with, which is like your article from Medium, which is the vulnerability in adults. It's the failure. I jumped from language to language because I hit a plateau, and then I'm like, I'm not making any And the thing is, you think that you're not making progress, but it's because your progress seems slower, right?
Exactly.
Getting from 1 to 50%, you're like, whoa. 50 to 55, even though that's a 5% increase, it still doesn't feel like anything.
Exactly. Exactly. You're right. And you're not alone in this. There are many language learners who get frustrated at that plateau.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I would jump from language to language is okay, here I got to go here. Okay, now I'm making really good progress. Okay. Oh, I'm stopped. Well, this other language looks cool because at the beginning learning hello, how are you, what's going on, I like to eat, it's super easy to pick up. It's just which is actually kind of the opposite. One of the reasons like I finally had a reverse experience, and that was when I was doing the Korean, which I still stand by what I said on Lindy's interview, and that is that I have kind of fallen out of love with Japanese, and I do love Korean. But what made me do what I'm doing is I was going through all this stuff in Korean, and I thought everything that was coming up, I said in my head in Japanese when I was learning. And I said, you know what?
Interesting.
I said, this is ridiculous. Like, I already know all of this. everything that I did in that course on that entire week stream I did of learning Korean, I can say every single thing in that Korean that I did in Japanese, and I thought, I already know so much, man. Like, I had to step back and kind of be like, you know what, dude, it's not that bad. Like,
Exactly. Sometimes all it takes is a comparison point or that contrast.
yeah,
And then you're like, oh my goodness, really? Am I going through all of this again when that other language, I
yeah.
already am at that awesome point in which I can actually develop it. But that's interesting because I was really about to ask why Japanese? Why did you stick to Japanese and not anything else?
Yeah, and like I said, I know in that Lindy interview, I specifically said that I had fallen out of love with Japanese, and again, I stand by that. I kind of have. This has kind of gotten me back into it, but it's a love hate relationship that I've had for 11 years now, and it's because it's so hard, but it's also because I've studied so wrong my entire life. I have
Same.
never in my life studied, and I've tried to take inspiration from people. I know Lindy does textbooks and stuff, and I always see her post on Instagram with her sweet pen pattern and stuff,
Yeah, man, I love
and
that.
um,
She's killing me with those cute like
yeah,
notes and everything.
and I started and I said so. Basically, what happened is I'm calling this is 100% my last attempt. Like, this is kind of the put up or shut up. This is the absolute last attempt at Japanese. I'm giving myself one more time because I feel I owe it to myself with using a legitimate study plan.
Right.
Because I've never done that. It's always been applications and things like that, which are fine, but I've never done anything to try to get myself to a further level. And so this is my last. I don't know if this will make sense. This is a phrase that they use in America sometimes. This is my last chance. This is the end. This is the it. So I'm doing this. I am gonna stick to it. Legitimately going to stick to it for a couple of months to see if I make progress. And the reason is, and I've seen people who are like, this is a waste of time. But here's the thing. If I do what I'm doing, new study plan, I'm using some books, I'm doing the immersion thing. If I stick to this for 3 months and I've made no progress, I'm officially the same level I was before I started. So I've lost nothing.
Exactly.
There's no reason to not try it.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. And are there things that you've tried that you were like, okay, definitely not, this doesn't work,
Yeah.
hate it, or like not hate it maybe, but it's not for me at all. Like, so anything, any technique that you tried that you were, so for me, it's definitely lists.
Hmm.
Forget it, it's not gonna work. I tried lists, they were killing me, I was overwhelmed. I tried, they look boring. I'm not gonna go there again.
Yeah.
Or flashcards with isolated words
Yep.
like house or something like that. Like, it's not
Yeah.
gonna work. It has to be in context, it has to be repeated, it has to be in different places that I see it. And so, is there anything like that for you? Something that you're like, never again?
Um. Yeah. I first off, I like Memrise, but I think that the courses that have the words in context are fine. I spent a ton of time going through. This is a long time ago. I can't remember what language it was. That's when you know you have a problem. I don't remember what language I'm talking about. Um, so I had spent all this time going through, man, like 200 or 300 words. Um, and then I tried to, when I was going through and reviewing, I couldn't recall them at all.
Okay.
And sometimes I couldn't even recognize them. And I thought, okay, this was a giant waste of time. The only time I've had a great experience with Link, what? The only time I've ever had a great experience with Memrise in terms of the vocabulary sticking, I did the entire. Somebody did the entire course of the Esperanto tree in Memrise.
Okay.
So I learned those words, but I did it section by section. I would learn animals, and then I would go to Duolingo and I would do the animals section. That way I saw those words in context, and that made it stick. But yeah, in terms of just using this this idea of just learning words. If I hear them in context, that's one thing
Right.
because I have that relationship to them. But it just like if right now I learned the word for jewelry box in whatever language, like my wife has a jewelry box right here. Okay, I probably wouldn't be able to remember that because I've not heard it in context or anything like that. So yeah, just individual word usage like that is, I don't know. Let's see,
Hmm.
Lindy, on Maria's question, man, I really don't mean to badmouth Link here, but it just not worked for me. Maybe I'm too picky as a designer. I agreed with isolated flashcards, not useful. Yeah, no, like I said, as someone, I can look at Link and immediately be like, you don't have to explain yourself. I understand. Like, I understand. It's not a pretty system. Rasmus says SRS is the thing to avoid for me. I don't. Lindy says I don't like Anki as an SRS because it stressed me out, but I found Quizlet is pretty nice. It doesn't stress you to
Even
review
third level.
like Anki and Memorize does. Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I also use it.
Jonathan Maria, what do you think about the gold list method? Yeah, have you ever used the gold? I've never used it, but it's something I've been interested in. Have you seen the gold list method?
No.
It's this.
So you mean like just go as you go, or what's?
It's hold on, I'm gonna pull up gold list method
Sure.
because I don't want to tell you incorrectly. So the gold list method, from what I understand, I know. Let's see, author gold method. The method allows you to retain up to 30% of the words in your long-term memory. It's also claim. Let me see. Let me read because I know that you write stuff down and then like every day, what you remember, you add to a different tab or something. Let me see if I can get like a kind of a
Ah,
Cliff Notes version of it here.
sounds promising.
What's it all about? Yeah, so get a large notebook. You prepare the materials. You write the words that you're interested in. That's actually, and see, that's a huge thing too. I think memorizing just random arbitrary vocabulary lists is a bad idea. If you write
Mhm.
down words that you're interested in, like I watch every day on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel called ATF Basketball Camp because I love basketball, and it's even though I know how to play basketball, it's a guy explaining the rules in Japanese, and that's something I'm interested in, so it's easy for me to watch. And I actually learned a word in Japanese from that, which is baichin, which is to like slap, and I picked it up purposely through content because he was holding the ball and he baichin 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 baichin. That's so.
Awesome. Yeah,
Oh,
it's a great idea.
open your book and write the first 25 words or phrases down, one below the other on the left hand side of the individual page, including any integral information such as gender or plural forms of nouns or irregular aspects of the verbs. List shouldn't take more than 25 minutes or 20 minutes to do. When the list is ready, read through it out loud, mindfully but without straining to remember. When you start the next page of the head list, number it 26 to 50, then 51 to 75, and so on. So you do 25.
Okay.
Okay, so the first distillation. After at least 2 weeks, open your notebook and cast your eye towards your first list of 1 to 25, or whatever number you're on, depending on which double spread you're at. Yeah, okay, whichever one you're at. So the 2 weeks plus pause is important. It's intended to allow any short-term memories of the information to fade completely, so that you can be sure that the things you got into your long-term memory really are there. Make sure then that you date each set of 25 head list items for this. So discard 8 items and carry the remaining 17 into a new list. This will be your first distillation. You repeat this process for the second and third distillations at the interval of 2 weeks. So you just get rid of 8 and constantly go down. The fourth distillation, you start a new book called your Silver Book. The gold notebook works the same way. The hardcore items from the silver notebook's seventh distillation are carried to the gold. So basically, just the words that you remember over the course of these times go
Right.
to your,
Hmm.
and it
Hmm.
gets it into your method. I've read that before, but I've never used
Never
it.
heard
But
it.
it seems very very interesting. Like I would be interested. I would be interested in how it works. Whoops! I just opened my Anki on accident. When I was trying to get back
Yeah,
to the
based on my confused facial expression, you can see that I haven't used this method,
yeah.
and I didn't even know it. It seems interesting, yeah, and this is something that I really struggle with, and I'm not ashamed to admit it that I struggle so much with this. It's that I learn so much vocabulary, I write it down, I do 1,000 things with the words, but then I never go back to review it or try to memorize it or
Hmm.
try to. So yeah, maybe this technique could be something new to try.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know, like just and again, who knows, man? I'm 10 days into this new study pattern, and I've not learned as many words in terms of if I learn 25 new words a day. But what I have learned is words and phrases that have jumped out at me in native content that I am not forgetting. So I don't know if it's better. Well, I do. For me, I think it's better to have no. I would rather know 1,000 words by heart that I can use anytime on just any situation than 5,000 words and stumble over myself and be like, oh God, what's the word for that? What word do I use in this context? Because I know it's different. That I mean, that's me personally, of course, but I don't know. So it's interesting. It's an interesting method though. Like I could see the,
Oh yeah,
but
sure. And I think something that immersion also helps us with is frequency, which is something we don't talk about regularly, but frequency is so important. There are just some expressions or words that people won't be using that often, and by contacting and exposing ourselves to this material, we start understanding slowly what expressions are constantly used and which ones never come up, so we don't
yeah,
have to worry about that for
yeah.
now.
Yeah, I've always tried to find frequency lists, but the way that I'm approaching it currently is if I hear a word and that's the thing. If I hear a word enough that it jumps out at me, I've
Yeah.
heard it before. That word is used pretty frequently. Another word, for example, is I'm watching. There's a show on Netflix called Erased, and this. I've seen it before, so I know the story. So it's good for me to watch. But this kid kept saying Shinjiru, which and I was like, okay, I've heard that word 100 times, and if I'm remembering
Exactly.
correctly, I know that a lot of the kids, even though he's going through a weird situation, say that they believe him, and I was like, I bet that means believe, and so I went to the dictionary and looked it up. Shinjiru is to believe, so
Exactly.
just and hearing it in context made it stick.
Yeah, and sometimes we forget that our brain can also detect patterns and, kind of create conclusions. Sometimes we don't need to understand every single thing word by word by word. Sometimes our brain is just, oh, okay. In this context, probably it means blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So it's also important to
Yep.
take that into consideration.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's also it's a good way to get new slangs and new not even necessarily slangs, but yeah, like little I mean metaphors. Well, like earlier I said, "Last chance you," like, and that's just like an American metaphor. Sometimes it's just like um, I think what it derived from is like a guy playing sports, and he basically had gotten kicked off a bunch of teams, and he got signed to he basically went to play for another team, and that was his last chance at university. And it just kind of has dwindled down to last chance you, and it just so.
That's you.
But I mean, like it's just a metaphor, and it's a good way to pick some of that stuff up.
Exactly.
So, do you have was there anything else that you wanted to chat about? Is there any topics that you wanted to discuss or anything anything?
Hmm. For now, I don't think so. I think that we've spoken about so many interesting things that I had in mind. So for now, I think I'm okay. I don't know if anyone has
Okay.
questions because I can see
Yeah,
the
yeah.
chat.
If anybody has questions, I'll chat with Marie for another minute, and that because there's like a 15 to 20 second delay here. But put your questions there, or any kind of things, and I will get to those. And definitely go. I have Maria's website in the description. And once I'm going to get the article that she wrote for Medium, and I will put that in the description. Actually, I'll do that right now. Let me grab that article because it goes in depth about the vulnerability in adults learning languages, which we touched on earlier. Talking about the
And,
failures
and
and
comparing yourself to others
yeah,
and
yeah. That's
the usual.
actually
The usual.
that's a good point. There's so when I had a guy Chad Zimmerman on, who is a Japanese he makes YouTube content in Japanese, and he told me, he said, I will never upload a video of myself speaking Japanese because I don't want anybody to compare themselves to me. He said, because A, I'm not the best speaker, and it depends on what you're learning, in terms of like and that's what he said. He said I could speak circles around people talking about Japanese fishing because that's what I love. But if somebody's trying to talk to me about this, then they can do that. And the worst thing that you can do is compare yourself to others and how they speak.
Have you struggled with that?
Oh, good God, yeah. I struggle with everything. I don't know if anybody's picked this up. I am absolutely the worst language learner on the planet. And that's okay. Because I still enjoy what I do.
The first video that caught my attention, I think we had interacted before on social media, but the first video of yours that caught my attention was something like, I am the worst polyglot, or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yep. And
The moment I read that title, I was like, I have to watch this video.
That's me in a nutshell. All right, hold on. So, Keith says, question for Maria: what is your most advanced non-native language, and how did you acquire it?
English and Spanish. And so my native language is Portuguese. English and Spanish are not my native languages. However, I acquired them a lot through childhood. So many could say, oh, but that's unfair because you were not actually studying them. You were learning them as a child and as you were growing up. So apart from those, German is my most advanced language in comparison to English and Spanish. But the way that I improve these and the way that I try to bring them to fluency, or at least, more advanced, is, as I said, it's mostly like diversifying materials, trying my best to contact with the language in different formats. So yeah, that's the essential. Seeing stuff in context, not just memorizing one word here and there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's your English. Like I said, and same thing with Lindy. When I found out, which I know Lindy learned English from being young as well. But like when I found out neither one of you guys were like, I mean, not that you're not native English speakers in terms of study, but like you're not from an predominantly English speaking country. It just blew my mind in half. I was like, what? So maybe that's a very American.
Everyone can.
Yeah, maybe that's a very American way to.
Yeah, thing is, in Portugal, if you say like, I speak English, people are like, so. Or if you're like, I speak English and Spanish, people are still like, so? you know, it's just not that special. It's really not.
Yeah, it's a weird, and that's honestly, I feel bad for English learners because once you learn, so like if I go to a Chinese restaurant here and I just bust out some like, ni hui wo hui shui di wen, like I speak a little bit of Chinese, that's gonna right?
Whoa.
But if somebody comes here, right? If somebody comes here and they have a little bit of an accent, or they maybe don't speak perfectly, and they're like, "Oh, I learned English," people are like, "Well, good, you should." Like, so I almost feel bad for English learners because it's like, what's the point? There's not that you do it because you want praise, but like you're never gonna get that. Man, that's really good that you did that because this is such a stupid language.
I think it's let's forget historical events for a while, but I think that English, it's our lingua franca, right? So in my opinion, we should learn it, if not for anything else, for survival, to talk to as many people as possible, not from that perspective of it's a superior language. I don't think any language or dialect is superior to any other. It's the international language. It's the common tongue. If it were Arabic or Chinese or anything else, I would still support that people should learn it as quickly and as good as possible.
Yeah.
But I agree that depending on the country, knowing several languages or one can be completely, can change your mind completely.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a guy named Tyler who runs a blog called it's like the Armchair Linguist, and somebody had asked us during the stream about a lingua franca, and both of us kind of had the same idea, and the reason I don't think anything will ever truly take over is because, and the only thing I can equate this to is English because that's my native language, but even in parts of the United States, we speak the language differently. So if you
Uh-huh.
if you try to institute a lingua franca, it's still not going to be spoken the same. It's not even spoken the same in the same country. So how in the world do you think that someone from the other side of the world is going to try to do that too?
And this is the problem that many of my students had back in Portugal. They were like, but I don't sound like native. And I was like, what native? What country? What region? What city are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
You know, native. Okay, but the English speaking world is huge.
Yeah.
And different countries have different dialects, different regions within the country have other ways of pronouncing things. So it's stupid. And it is indeed now an international language. And something that I try to convey is don't be ashamed of your accent. You are creating this language as you go, right?
Yep.
Every day that passes, we create languages. We contribute to their future and to their identity as we go. It's not finished.
Yeah.
It's not a finished product.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I always see a picture of man, I wish I could remember what it said. I'm gonna paraphrase this, but it has basically it said it's something to the effect of don't make fun of someone with an accent because it shows that they are willing to step out of their comfort zone. Something of that nature.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
God, and especially to English speakers, man, I couldn't imagine, like, I don't know, man. English speakers, man, we're some weird, like, we have this weird pride about this is the only thing for us, man. So I couldn't imagine. Cool. I think is that it. But anyway, lots of ton of words. True. English grammar is whack. Lindy says she still struggles with English prepositions.
English grammar is
And Beats says currently learning advanced Spanish. So yeah, well, I will let you go. I know it's later in the day, and I know that I messed up the time. Sorry about that. Like I said,
Oh no,
I'm
that
hoping
was so entertaining. I loved it.
I'm hoping that America gets rid of daylight saving. There's a lot of states in America that have already gotten rid of daylight savings time, but it's just like a few of us are still holding on, and it's so stupid.
And you should definitely, get some rest, well-deserved rest.
Yeah,
Inviting all of us maniacs to your channel.
yeah. Hey,
My day, morning, afternoon, evening.
yeah. No, I love it. I'm happy to. It's been amazing. I am gonna slow down a little bit because this is my 10th interview in 2 weeks. But I enjoy. That's the thing. Like, and the one thing I love about the language learning community is it doesn't matter if you are. I say this in quotes, like, it doesn't matter if you're well known, and I don't mean that the way that
Yeah.
it sounds, but people will talk to anybody. I've talked to people who don't have YouTube channels, and I've talked to, you know what I mean? And I don't care. If you love languages, that's my criteria.
Yeah, exactly. Mine too. So join us whenever you'd like.
Yeah. So anytime. If anybody watching this wants to come on, let me know and we'll make a time. I like to do them live because I love having the chat interact. I think that can add, just to get questions that you may not have thought of. So that's why I like to do them live. But yeah. So anybody, thank you all for watching. Lindy, thanks for stopping by. That was super amazing.
Thank
I know
you,
that we're on
guys.
massive time, and thanks to everybody for dropping by. And I know my next one is Monday 9 p.m. Eastern time. I have my buddy Kyle on, who I met via Esperanto. Actually, I know a lot of people criticize Esperanto, but we're gonna jump into how our friendship formed over that. So that will be then. Maria, thank you for joining. All the links are in the
Thank you.
bottom. Lindy, if you want, send me a message. We'll work on your Singapore time, and I'll get you on here. That would be insane. So yeah, thank you all for joining, and yeah, I will see you guys in the next stream. And all of Maria's links I have her link to her website. Maria's links are in the
My goodness.
they're in the description and her article that she wrote for Medium. So you go check that out because it's very, very good stuff. Thank you all, and we will see you later.
Ciao.